A man sits at a table with a row of switches in front of him. The last few are labeled in red: 435 volts, 450 volts, then just XXX. On the other side of a wall, a stranger is strapped to a chair. Every wrong answer, the man flips the next switch. The voltage climbs. The stranger grunts, then protests, then screams that his heart is bothering him, and then goes silent, which is somehow worse. The man at the table wants to stop. He doesn't want to continue, but the man in the lab coat behind him says 4 words: "Please continue the experiment." And in the majority of cases, that's the whole negotiation. The man continues to flip the next switch anyway. You've probably heard this several times. Ordinary people will do monstrous things if authority tells them to. 65% of the people tested proved this statement. But these weren't cold, obedient men. They were sweating, stammering, begging the experimenter to check on the man behind the wall. They said they wanted out, but they kept going because nobody had ever taught them to say no to a person standing right in front of them. That gap between wanting to refuse and actually refusing is running in your life right now. The shift you agreed to cover, the favor you didn't have time for, the plans you hate that you'll show up to anyway. That gap is running in your life right now. This isn't going to hand you a diagnosis, but by the end, that gap should make a lot more sense, and you'll have 3 ways to start closing it. Fight, flight, freeze. Therapists who work with trauma added a 4th word a few decades back: fawn. Fight is standing your ground. Flight is running. Freeze is going still, hoping the threat passes you by. Fawn is different. Fawn is making yourself so agreeable, so useful, so instantly compliant that the threat has no reason to hurt you. For most people, this started as a strategy that actually worked. A kid with a parent whose mood you couldn't predict learns fast. Agreement buys peace. Say yes before they finish asking. Read the room before you're told to. Never be the reason things got worse. That's not a personality trait. It's a survival skill, built under conditions where it genuinely kept a child safer. The problem is, the skill doesn't come with an expiration date. The nervous system that learned compliance equals safety at 7 doesn't automatically update at 35, even once the danger is long gone. So you end up as an adult whose body still treats every request the same way it once treated a slammed door. Something to diffuse immediately by saying yes. This shows up in ordinary rooms far more often than anyone talks about, because nobody makes a documentary about the guy who just quietly always says yes. There's a father who has never once said no to the PTA, the carpool schedule, or the coaching job nobody else would take. His own son plays travel soccer 3 towns over. He has missed 6 of this season's 8 games because he was driving somebody else's kid to practice instead. There's a man who has never once negotiated his salary in 20 years of working, because asking for what he's worth feels less like a request and more like an imposition. He tells himself he isn't materialistic. What he doesn't say out loud is that the thought of someone looking at him like he'd overstepped is worse to him than the money he's left on the table 3 jobs running. It's the guy who said yes to covering Tuesday, then Wednesday, then the weekend shift he specifically requested off for his sister's graduation, and when his manager said you're a lifesaver, he smiled like that was a compliment. It's the friend who picks up the phone at 2 in the morning every single time and has quietly stopped expecting anyone to do the same for him. And it's the guy who ends up hosting every single holiday, not because he offered first, but because nobody could quite picture him saying no, so eventually nobody bothered to ask. It just became his. So why can't you just stop? Saying no to someone standing in front of you, especially someone you like or depend on, doesn't just feel uncomfortable. Studies on social rejection show it registers in the brain a lot like physical threat. Your nervous system doesn't always know the difference between someone is disappointed in me and something is wrong. which means every time you consider saying no, some older, faster part of your brain is quietly telling you this is dangerous. No wonder the yes comes out faster than the no ever could. The cost of losing that argument every time adds up. Resentment that never gets spoken, because the same instinct that made you say yes also makes it impossible to say you're angry about it. A calendar that belongs to everyone except you. Friendships that survive because one person always bends, and can survive that way for years, right up until the person who bends finally can't anymore, and it ends all at once instead of gradually. Chronic stress, because a body that's always negotiating with an invisible threat doesn't get much rest between negotiations. And there's a cost that almost never gets named. People who can't say no are eventually treated less like a person with limits and more like a resource with none. Not out of cruelty, just because nobody ever hit the edge of you, so nobody ever learned you had one. You don't need a childhood you can point to and blame. Most people who do this can't even name when it started. What you need is a way to interrupt the pattern the next time a request lands on you. First, never answer in the room. The fawn response fires fastest under direct pressure, the exact moment someone is standing in front of you waiting. Take that moment away from it. Practice one sentence until it's automatic. Let me check and get back to you. Not a lie. Not even a soft no. Just a delay, long enough for the part of your brain that isn't panicking to catch up and actually weigh in. Second, stop explaining. When you do say no, resist the urge to build a case for it. A long explanation is usually the fawn response trying to argue its way back into a yes, or trying to earn permission to have said no in the first place. You don't need permission. I can't take this on right now is a complete sentence. Say it. Let the silence after it sit there instead of filling it. Third, and this is the one that actually changes things, practice on something small before you practice on something that matters. Don't take your first real no straight to the person whose opinion of you could wreck your week. Take it somewhere low stakes first. I practiced this on a coffee invitation from a coworker I don't like. Said no. He said no problem. That was it. I checked my pulse afterward like I'd survived something. The goal isn't the coffee. The goal is proving to your own nervous system that a no didn't kill you, so the next one, and the one after that, gets a little easier to say. Tell me in the comments about the last time you wanted to say no and said yes instead. Noticing it is the first step. If you watched up to this point, thanks for tagging along, and I hope you picked up a thing or two. Stay safe. Until next time.